Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you. Thank you for joining me once again for another Spirit Review video. And today we're going to be taking a look at the newest Baker's Bourbon coming to us from Jim Beam, the 7-year-old single barrel, along with its limited edition counterpart, the 13-year-old single barrel. But we're going to compare the new releases to the old original 1992 bottling of Baker's Bourbon right here. And we kind of want to see what has happened throughout the years and what's new, what's different, all right? Now, retail pricing on the new Baker's Bourbon 7 is about $55, $60. On the 13-year-old, we're looking at about $100, $125 if you're fortunate enough to see this on the shelf. They did tend to fly off shelves. Now on secondary and through auctions and so on, we're seeing these approach about $250 right now. So you could expect to see anywhere from $100 to $250 for the 13-year-old. But the 7-year-olds, hopefully you still find that it's about $60. Now, originally back in 1992 when Baker's came out, it was a small batch product, meaning a blend of barrels. It still was bottled at 107 proof, 7-year-old. That was the original. These, same thing, 107. But back in 1992, Booker Noe was the distiller there at Jim Beam, and Booker had previously created Booker's Bourbon to hit shelves back around 1987. So he followed that up with the other bourbons that were going to complete his small batch collection, which included this one. It included the Basil Hayden and, of course, Knob Creek. Now, of that collection, Basil and Baker's were always kind of the slower sellers. And I guess that's what led kind of to the reincarnation of the 7 and 13 as single barrel products now. Of course, back in 1992, when he was creating this brand, he basically named it after his cousin, who is Baker Beam. He is the great-grand-nephew of Jim Beam. And he would have him come into the rack house and help select barrels from throughout different tiers to create a flavor profile that he enjoyed. Now, he was always saying that he was looking for a full-flavored, robust bourbon with a silky smooth finish. Those are his words. And so that's how come he would need to not just pull from the top tiers, but throughout to try to get that profile just right. All right, but let's go ahead and get to the nosing and tasting. What else do we need? Oh, you know what? We didn't talk about mash bill. 77% corn, 13% rye, and 10% barley. All right. Now, starting with the old one, let's give it a little swirl. Ugh, golly. Loads of brown sugar. Almost heading towards a molasses character. It's just really deep brown sugar. Some roasted nuts, red berries, cherries, raspberries. Little cinnamon popping. Chocolate. Kind of milk and dark chocolate. Leather, oak. And there's a little whisper of tobacco, aged tobacco on the nose. And it definitely has that old whiskey character. I like to call it like a dusty bourbon. You know, those old bourbons, they kind of had this, I always kind of describe it as machine oil. There's a machine oil characteristic in them. And it's, when I've spoken to, you know, different master distillers throughout the years that have been there for many years, they always talked about, you know, what led to that? What caused that characteristic in your old bourbons? And they would say, well, you know, it's just that we weren't as computerized, so we didn't have as much, there was some human error, let's just say. And maybe it wasn't as clean as it is nowadays, so, you know, and I was like, okay, well, maybe that's what did it. But regardless, that's a great characteristic in old bourbons that we don't no longer see in the newer stuff. But let's go ahead and taste it and see what we think. Wow. Medium high viscosity. Again, big brown sugar characteristic. It's not overly sweet. There's not a lot of caramel sweetness. It's just brown sugar depth. It's brown sugar cooking those cherries and raspberries together in the pan type thing. Dark chocolate. Just a little bit of milk chocolate, not a lot, but dark chocolate. Cinnamon. Just provides just a little oomph right there on the mid palate, but this does not drink 107 proof. This drinks about 100 proof. I always gas all my bottles, so even though this is from 92, I probably opened this probably around, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago. But I keep it gassed all the time, constantly keep it gassed. And so flavor profile wise, it's fantastic. The oak is in here. It's very balanced. Oak and leather, old leather with that chocolate. And then the tobacco that I picked up on the nose is in there on the finish. Nothing wrong with that. Now, keep in mind, one thing about bourbon back then, in the 90s, let's say, was that the quality of bourbon overall was very, very high. So, you know, this back then, as good as it to me is now, back then it was just like, you know, it's good bourbon, you know, it's not the best, because there was a lot that were better. But of course now when we compare it to kind of the newer style of bourbon, the newer style is much younger, much more orchard fruit and just citrus driven. And so when you taste something older like this, you can really notice a big difference, and it really comes off as probably a lot better than you remember it, just because of where we are now. But hey, it's no longer around, so it is what it is. All right, now we're going to check the new 7-year-old. Wow, double rinse here. All right, on the nose. Wow, okay. Yeah, this one's a lot brighter. It's got a lot of bright nuttiness. So there's a big peanut almond characteristic to it. Yeah, it's almost like a... And then you get a really big hit of cherries and kind of a golden apple, or... yeah, I would go with that, like an overripe golden apple. There's a little bit of a doughiness as well. Almost like the fruits are, like that apple, when I said it was overripe, it's almost like it's a little heading towards sour. But I think that's part of that fermentation that's still coming through, even through the distillate. At 7 years old, it still has a little bit of that sourness going on. The oak is very balanced in here. It's nice. It's very rich oak, but it's not overpowering anything. Cinnamon, pretty balanced as well. That sourness is a little unique, though. All right, let's taste it. All right, it's really nice. Good, medium viscosity, medium high viscosity. It's a really solid bourbon. It's got just the right amount of heat. It enters, it gives you that, again, it's kind of almost like the way the chocolate is with the nuttiness, it's almost like a toffee element. Then you start getting that, those, again, red berries kind of stewed a little bit. That's in here as well. The sour tone that I was picking up on the nose, you pick it up, but it's much more balanced on the palate than it was on the nose. Let me retrace this. Yeah, toffee, brittle. The roasted nuts actually start coming up a little more after that. Cinnamon providing the warmth. Cocoa powder. And you're already starting to pick up those ripe, almost soured golden apples that are in there. Slightly baked, we'll go with that. There's a little bit of a cherry tone, a little bit of that stewed berry tone is in there as well. It's still feeling stewed because, again, that sour tone just makes it feel that way. On the back end, you start getting the leather, the oak. The oak, I love how the oak is integrated in this one. Very, very balanced. It's not too little, it's not too much. It's very clean oak. And then you get a little bit of that, kind of a little bit of an older leather character on the back end. Unfortunately, no tobacco, but at least it gives you a little bit of that old leather on the back end. Overall, very enjoyable bourbon for $60. That's a really good buy here, if you see that. Now look at the difference in color. I'm going to turn this around. And yes, this bottle has been shared. Look at the color on this 13. Unbelievable color here. And that's natural. They're not adding anything. You can't do that here in bourbon. This is natural here. So let's go to the nose on the 13-year-old. Give it a little swirl. Boom. Gosh. Yeah, that's ridiculous. All right, where do we start? I would say this one has, overall, if I was going to name this one like one specific character, it's chocolate-covered raspberries. It's got the raspberry. It's got the almost like a brandied cherries as well. There's a little bit of that nuttiness that was in here, but now we're starting to lean into like amaretto territory, like the almond and the peanut and the roasted nuttiness has now started to develop into a really high quality after dinner pour. And that's what this one just hits me. Old leather. There's a little bit of a orange oil, little furniture polish as well, a little mahogany type aspect on the wood. Gosh, that's stellar for them. Okay, now here, so I came out of the glass, kind of reset my nose. Now here when I come back in it, I can still pick up a little bit of the soured fruits in here. So that's just a distillery characteristic of them, that yeasty profile that they tend to have. That carries through even at 13 years of maturation that is carrying through. But I will say it's in there, when you focus on it, you'll notice it, but that's not the star of this show. And really, it just kind of adds a complexity, almost like a sherry whiskey adds that complexity, that sherry cask. That slight sourness to the fruits is just adding a little more complexity. Okay, let's taste it. Yeah. Wow. That's mature bourbon. And it's really well done. Medium high viscosity. It's very rich, mouth coating. It's very savory whiskey. This one makes you almost salivate. But it's got the brown sugar. Yeah, loads of brown sugar. It's got that chocolate covered raspberry thing in loads. A little bit of those brandy cherries is in there. It's crazy, but it almost has to me like an Armagnac quality to it. I know that sounds nuts in the bourbon world, but it has this very rich, deep profile to it that I really enjoy. And then you get the orange oils and that little bit of that furniture polish and that really almost exotic wood, that mahogany kind of added in with that really rich oak. Old leather, old tobacco leaves. Now here long into the finish, when I start focusing on the finish and I chewed on it right there, it was a really aged tobacco leaf. Gosh. Yeah, it's almost like that combined with a little bit of like a pipe tobacco. Ugh, very, very good. But anyway, this is where we're at. It's in a great place as far as this 13-year-old is concerned. Very solid for the 7-year-old. This 1992 was fantastic back then, but of course there was a lot of great whiskeys back then. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison video. Thank you all for joining me here on YouTube. Of course, if you want more content like this on a more regular basis, join me over at patreon.com/LiquorHound. There I'm doing a video review every week. But until then, keep leaving all these great comments. I greatly appreciate everyone here on YouTube. Have a great day, and cheers.